very good afternoon to everybody present here. I am really thrilled to be here. And today, after discussing twice about interview skills extensively and dealing with a lot of questions that I could in the last two times, today let's move to resume building. Now, this might be a little tricky, and I'm sure a lot of you struggle with this because, it's very subjective to the field you're from, to the type of resume you wish to build, to the country that you stay in, and the country that you're applying the job in. So it's extremely subjective, but let's try to understand the base of it all so that once you understand the basic nuances and nitty-gritties and how AI actually helps you build better resumes by helping you with the language, with the grammar, with the sentence structuring, and how it has actually made our lives a little bit easier, how we should understand and how we can make a blend of the use of AI tools like ChatGPT, but also add a personal touch to it so that we can craft the best resume possible for our fields. So before we actually go into the different kinds of prompts that we should give into AI tools and the different types of resumes that you can work on, let's just discuss some pros and cons of ChatGPT, which is something which we will be focusing on mainly today. So everything has its advantages and everything does have its disadvantages. So let's look at the brighter picture first, because that's something we need to focus on. It helps you with efficiency and speed. Of course, when you're giving prompts to ChatGPT, it gives you answers quickly in a very formulated and in a very crisp manner, so that your process of creating your resumes can be speeded up, and it gives you efficient results. Then there's also scope for personalization, because when you give specific prompts to AI tools like ChatGPT, it helps you figure out answers and create scripts for you in a manner which might put in whatever is going on here, right? So whatever you're thinking, the better you describe it to the tool, the better results it will give in. Then comes in language and grammar. Now, we all know not everybody is comfortable with English language, and we might not be too great at grammar or too great at language or sentence structuring. Sometimes the struggle is that we have the right thought in our head, but we are not really able to give that thought out because we are we're struggling with the sentence formation, and that's how it becomes a little problematic at some points, right? So the best part is to have that clarity and to give out prompts to AI tools so that they can help you with the sentence structuring and you can avoid any kind of language or grammatical issues. Then it's a platform that allows you to give out guidance, because no matter what you ask ChatGPT, it can give you so many options, it gives you so many pointers. So it's a guiding tool as well. And then accessibility is something which is a great advantage because it's very easily accessible. You don't really have to learn something. You just have to type out your thought and it will frame everything for you. But on the flip side, there are some disadvantages, which I believe personally is something that you can work upon, and you can convert these also into your favor, making them advantages. So the first and the most important part is that it lacks human touch, right? Now, if you're completely dependent on AI tools, it's not really going to work well for you, right? And why is that? Because it lacks human touch. So if you just tell ChatGPT to create a resume for you, the recruiter, if they just go through that resume, within seconds, they can just figure out that this resume has been created using AI tools, because everybody has been using these AI tools these days. So what's important is that you tell ChatGPT what you want, you give out the prompt, you try to convey what idea you have in your head, let it frame something for you, but then you should definitely tweak and twist and mold it in a manner that shows that you have put in your personalized touch and that you have created it. So it should be a blend of both. It should be a blend of you using the AI tool for all the good reasons like we've mentioned and discussed, and also put in that effort that's required to give a human touch to it. Then comes lack of personal insight, which is again around the same thought process, that it does lack a lot of personal insight. So the more personalized prompts you're giving it, the more personalized you're trying to make it, and the simpler language you're trying to go ahead with, it will give a human touch to it, right? So if you think that it's giving you some complex sentences, try giving a prompt where it can give you easier sentences. And if not, try to get the thought behind it. And if you're good with language, just try to rephrase what it said. Once the idea is conveyed and once it's giving you a proper structure, you can twist and mold around it, play around it, and create a very personalized and something which has a human touch in it. Then there could be context understanding, right? When you're giving some prompts, maybe you have something in your head which you're not able to convey well, but ChatGPT understands it in another manner and then it gives you something else. So it's very important to give very specific to the point prompts so that your thoughts can align with the tool itself. And then, of course, there are customization limits sometimes, because no matter how many prompts you give, it has a way of writing, it has a way of giving you stuff which might not fulfill your entire needs, right? And that's why we always say giving a human touch is very important. Dependency on inputs is again something which we can mingle with context understanding, that it's completely dependent on your inputs. The better inputs you're giving to the AI tool, the better it will give you the results. So before we move ahead, let's just have a look at what are the kind of prompts that you can give so that you get a better understanding. I'll just share my screen again. Is my ChatGPT screen up? Can somebody please confirm? Okay, great. Thank you so much. So let's see what are the different types of prompts we can give to ChatGPT so that it understands better and it gives you better results. As I said, you have to be very specific. That's what's important. And if you're not being specific, it will give you very generalized results, which will lead to problems. And of course, it'll be very evident that you've just used the tool to generate ideas in a very basic manner, which mostly a lot of people are doing. So it's important to have a blend of both your human touch and the AI tool. So now let's take an example. We'll come to the templates, we'll come to resume building part right after this, but let's just discuss some basic subsections and subheadings that are usually present in a resume. It could be your work experience, it could be your education qualifications, it could be the skills that you have, right? It could be the personal projects you've worked on or volunteering. So let's take one example which works well for your understanding so that we don't have to be very specific about it, which is the skills section. So what if I just type in here, when it comes to my skills, I say, help me compile a list of skills for a resume aimed at. Now, after aimed at, give the industry that you're interested in knowing. So if I say aimed at training industry, okay, please include a balanced mix of technical and interpersonal skills, and specify any softwares or tools proficiency needed for this role. So again, if you notice, I'm being very specific. I've told it to give a list of skills for a resume which is aimed to target the training industry. Now here you have to mention which industry you're looking at. And then you're also telling it that you need a balanced mix of both technical skills and interpersonal skills, and if there are any softwares or tools required for this role, right? So if I give it this prompt, let's see what it generates. So again, what I've necessarily done here is I have told it very specifically to give me a blend of both soft skills as well as hard skills needed in the industry. Now again, you're not going to directly copy this, right? When I say I have to mention my skills in my resume for the training industry, right? I will go through everything that it's given me, but then I will try to figure out and narrow it down to the skills that I actually have. Now let's just have a look. For example, for technical skills, it gave me instructional designing, e-learning development, curriculum development. Now let's take an example. For example, I've always been in the training industry, which has just restricted myself to giving out trainings verbally to people. Now, for example, I do not know what instructional designing is, or maybe I know, but I've not really worked around it, right? Now, instructional designing is a vast field in itself, which has a lot of tools that people can play around, right? But suppose I do not know it and I have not worked upon it, and I just blindly copy paste this into my resume, this will actually backfire me. Why? Because you don't have any particular evidence that you've taken some certification on instructional designing, or you have some relevant work experience regarding this field, right? So you have to figure out what works for you, because if you end up copy pasting blindly, it will lead to a spiral of lies, especially during your interview. We discussed this the last time too, that you should never really lie on your resume. I'm not sure if we discussed, but if we haven't, that's a very important point that I'm making right now, that you should never really lie on your resume, because then when you actually get shortlisted for the interview, it can lead to a spiral of lies and it will backfire you. So you need to read out whatever it's giving out and filter it out according to your needs, right? So if I do not know instructional designing, I will just chuck it out. If I am aware of e-learning development, I can read these pointers. Now, again, here it's giving me authorizing tools examples. Now, for example, I have worked on 2 of these tools, but I've not worked on all 4. So I will remove those 2, right? So that's why human touch and personal insight becomes extremely crucial while giving prompts and using AI tools like ChatGPT, so that you do not blindly follow what you're giving out there. It will give you a variety of answers, a variety of options, but it's your duty to filter it out, give it a personalized touch according to your experience and your needs and requirements. Similarly, when it comes to interpersonal skills, of course, communication, public speaking is something which is very crucial in the training industry. So I am sure I'm going to have these skills, right? So I'm going to mention these skills. Now, adaptability, problem solving, empathy, patience, organizational skills. Again, you will have to filter out whatever works for you and mention the skills that you actually possess. Now, when it comes to softwares, if I know these softwares, now everybody knows Zoom, everybody knows how to play around Teams or WebEx, right? So this is something I can keep. Now, if I am not good with video editing, because that comes a little bit under the umbrella term of graphic designing, so I will not add this, right? Because imagine if I just blindly copy paste this and I've mentioned that I actually know how to use these tools, it can backfire me, right? So you have to filter out, you have to figure out what works for you. Give the AI prompts, the answers given by ChatGPT, the personal insight and the human touch that it requires to form the best resumes and get the best answers possible. Okay. So I am just going through if there are any questions here in the Q&A section. Okay. There's nothing specific as such, so let's just move ahead. Let's take one more prompt probably. Now let's take an example of, say, volunteer experience. I need assistance integrating my volunteer experience, volunteer work into my resume, right? That's something, that's the basic first prompt you're giving out there. Then you tell it to focus on experience that demonstrate skills transferable to my desired career path. Please. Now, this is an important prompt that you can give in. Please keep the description concise and relevant. So you're telling it that you want something crisp, relevant, and concise, and that's the prompt I'm giving in for volunteering experience. Now, again, here, if you see, I've not really specified what I volunteered in, right? So again, what is this for? This is for it to give you an idea, to give you a structure on the kind of things you can write. It's giving you a very nice, structured, neat prompt and neat answers where it mentions, it's giving the name of the place that you might have interned it. Again, this is something you have to keep switching according to your personal needs. So whatever places you volunteered in, you're going to switch it to those. You're going to mention the city, you're going to mention the timeline, and then it has given you some really good pointers, right? Now, when we see these words or these action verbs that we call, which are an integral part of resume building, developed and delivered, created engaging material, facilitated interactive sessions, right? Now it's giving me something which is actually linked to the previous prompts, right? Which was that I am from the training industry. So again, you mentioned these different sections, mentioning the organizations that you volunteered with, the tasks you've done. And if you read these, a lot of this will actually work for your volunteering experiences as well. But again, what's important here is for you to read them, for you to filter out and give the human touch and personal insight that's actually required over here, right? Okay, somebody has said that they can't see the screen. Can everybody else see the screen? Can you all please confirm once?
Yes, it's visible, Hanspreet. Maybe it's some problem with their
Yeah.
settings.
So maybe you can just try logging it back in. There could be some glitch. Okay, great. So these were some examples on how you can give prompts to AI tools like ChatGPT and how it can actually give you a lot of options, variety of answers, but how it's very important for you to make sure you're adding that personal touch and giving in that insight, right? Okay, let's move ahead. Now, when I say Canva, okay, now Canva is something I'm taking an example of because that's something you all might have worked on, right? It's a very easy to use tool. It has a lot of free templates and it's very user friendly. So there could be other websites that you might be using for your resume building process, right? Now let's just look at the pros and cons of using websites like Canva. When I say these are the pros and cons of Canva, I am particularly focusing on the different templates that you download off the internet and how they can be helpful, but how they can also have some repercussions that you can work upon and give a personalized touch to again convert them into your favor. So the pros, let's go on with the pros first. It's user friendly. It's very easy to use. Nobody, anybody who does not have a lot of idea about designing can actually use these tools. It has customization options. You open one template, it gives you a lot of options to customize. It saves your time because you're not creating any templates from scratch. It gives you concise format, you're just replacing the information down there, right? It has a lot of options. You get so many different fancy template options on platforms like these, and it's cost effective. Now, I know a lot of these have paid versions as well, but I've always been using the free versions and it has a variety of options. So that's great. Now, when it comes to disadvantages, it could be that it has a lot of overused layouts that a lot of people might end up using the same thing. It can have customization complexities sometimes, and that happens because sometimes the templates are built in a manner that you can't really play around the font that's given in there, right? Or there's some alignment issue which you're trying to fix, but it's stuck upon there because it's designed in a manner where you can just change the content, but you can't really format it according to yourself. So it becomes a little complex when you're trying to do things like those. Then the most important thing is that it might have ATS compatibility issue. Now, what is ATS? ATS refers to applicant tracking system, and that's actually become the need of the hour in 2024. And that's something I will discuss once I'm done discussing the Canva templates part. So we'll discuss how ATS has become very, very important. Then internet access required. Again, this is not something you can do offline. If you're creating your resume on a Word document, of course, you can do it at any time without any internet access. But for tools like these, you need internet access at all times. And design may overpower content. Since a lot of these templates are focused so much on design, what happens is that the design is actually overpowering the content that you've mentioned, and it takes away the attention from what you've done and what your content is, right? So again, We have shared a few templates in your LMS, which you can have a look at later after the session, and it'll be really helpful for you. But before that, I have also shared two links over there, which I'm going to show you right now on how, even when you're using tools like Canva, it's important that you're using the right template. Now, if you see the designs, right? If you see, again, is my screen visible? I'm switching between screens, so I'm just confirming it again and again. You can see the Canva on my screen. Great. Okay. So if you see on the left-hand side, there are a lot of templates. You see there are pictures, there are fancy formats. If you see this one, it looks pretty fancy, right? But if you see the one that I've showed on my screen, it looks very simple, right? And if I just switch to this one, which I feel is better than the previous one, again, you'll say this is so plain and vanilla. Why do I use this? That's because, again, coming back to my point, that's because I believe that ATS has become very important in today's day and age. But again, as I've mentioned in the very beginning, resumes can be very subjective. It depends on the field you're from. It depends on the job role you're applying for. It depends on the company that you're working for. And most importantly, it depends on the country that you're working in. Now, according to vast research, when you're applying for jobs in countries like India or USA, a lot of companies have started using ATS. Now, ATS refers to applicant tracking system. I'll just give a brief here and then we'll move to the details and nitty-gritties after we discuss Canva. So what this software essentially does is that there are so many resumes coming in, right? So this software actually scans and ranks your resume in a manner that the recruiter, before they actually have a look at your resume, they scan it through ATS. And if your resume has the top 10 or top 20 rankings according to their requirement, only then they filter it out and they will have a look at it. So essentially, a tool is looking at your resume and it's rejecting or it's accepting your resumes, right? So when a person is not looking at it, no matter how much experience you have, if you have not created it in the right manner, it can be problematic because your resume is not actually going to reach the right audience, right? So what do you do for it? It's important to keep your resumes extremely simple. And when I say simple, it basically means that you're not adding any visuals and graphics to it. Why? Because this system is not compatible enough to read the visuals and graphics. So if you end up adding a picture, it will not be able to read it, right? Or again, if you're adding something like, let me just give you an example right here. Okay. So if you see this, right, it has so many graphics. Now, where do you, what is it that I'm exactly referring to? You see there are these little images involved. Again, this doesn't matter because it will ultimately read your address, your email ID and your website. But have a closer look at the skills section. Now, to indicate the efficiency in the skill that this person has, it shows bars, right? It has used some infographics. It's saying 80%, 91%, 85%. Now, when this kind of a resume goes into the ATS system, what happens is that it's not able to read these bars. So what will happen? This whole information will get ignored, right? Which means that ATS will not be able to read well about your skills because this whole section will be scraped off. It is only compatible to read simpler direct fonts, simpler texts. It does not read and it's not made to read infographics and visuals, right? And that's why when you say that a resume is something which is extremely short and you have to keep it concise, but what if some people really want to dig deep into your profile? That's why it's very, very essential that you add a LinkedIn profile to your resume. It should be hyperlinked somewhere here, right? If you add a link to your LinkedIn profile, which again should be up to date, the person can actually just make one click, go to your profile and understand more about you. They can look at your picture, they can look at if somebody has given you some recommendations, the kind of work you're doing, because there is so much more to you which is not there on your resume, which you can actually add and update on your LinkedIn profile so that the recruiter can get a better image of you. So that's why it's important to keep your resume templates extremely simple and easy to use. That's why even when you're referring to tools like Canva, it's important not to get lured by the fact that, there are so many more beautiful templates out there. Look for the simpler ones. They should look neat, tidy, and everything should be on point. Because even when the recruiter is having a look at your resume, according to research, they just look at your resume for probably 3 seconds. They're going to scan it in the first 3 seconds, and if it looks cluttered, if it's not looking very appealing, and if everything's not in a very structured manner, they will find it difficult to read, and they will not have the patience and time to actually go through the entire thing. It should be in a manner that it's crisp, concise, neat, structured, so that when I just look at it, I just look at the keywords, my brain scans it, and I know, and I get a basic gist of who you are and if you're fit for the organization or not. Okay. So that's how you actually use tools like Canva in order to get simpler templates, and again use simpler fonts. Now, when it comes to fonts and keywords, that's something that we'll just discuss in a few seconds. Okay, somebody has asked, how did you get to this section in Canva, the CV templates? Just type in resume templates or CV templates. It's actually a resume, because what we actually given for job applications is called a resume. A CV is something else which is usually longer. But if you just write CV or resume templates, it's mostly going to show you the same kind of results. So when you just type in on Canva on top in the search bar, you will get a list of templates. Again, I can show you this if you want once. So, here, if I just write resume template, it will give you a variety of options, right? So that's about it. It's very simple to use. You can give it the prompts according to your convenience. Now, again, I'm gonna switch to my PPT. I hope it's visible. Just one quick yes would do it. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, there's one more question, I think. Okay, how to use a LinkedIn application in a manner that will result us to find a good reputed company. I'm not sure I understood your question very well, but are you trying to say how is LinkedIn going to help you get jobs at good companies? Is that what you mean? Okay. So that's a completely different topic in itself. But the best part is that the first and the foremost, most important thing is that you should not just rely on LinkedIn. There are a lot of job portals these days. You need to do vast research. You need to figure out which is the best one that works for you. And the best way to find is on LinkedIn, especially if you want to do it, there's a job section, right? Right below. If you just open it on your mobile application, there's a section called jobs. So there are a lot of filter options there. Write the position you're looking for. You can filter out if you're looking for a work from home job, or are you open to traveling. If you want your job in a specific location, in a specific country, there's a lot of filters that you can give in there. And once you feed that, every day LinkedIn sends you mails, and it keeps giving you updates on all the job openings that are there according to your requirements. So that's how you do it. You just switch on or turn on the job portal mode by giving it filters and prompts, and it will work for you. Okay. Now, since we've discussed Canva, we've discussed Chat GPT, let's look at what ATS is, since I was referring to it. Now, ATS, as I told you, it ranks your resume, right? So why is it important? Again, now I'll give you a small example. I am repeatedly saying this, that not all companies use it, but especially when you're applying for jobs in India or US and a few more countries that you can research and find out about when and where, according to whatever job you're applying for, um, you have to be on the safer side, right? So if I personally am going to apply for a job in either India or US, to be on the safer side, I will create a resume which is ATS friendly, as simple as that. Okay. Now, why? That's because, as I told you, it's going to rank your resumes. So why take the risk to, create something which might not even get shortlisted? Now, the example that I wanted to take here was that I did a session with the UN once, and I was given a session on resume building there itself. And the lady constantly kept mentioning how it's very important to add a picture to your resume. And I was very confused because I was wondering that, there is so much confusion around this whole resume building part, that who do we actually listen to? But then when I did some extensive research, I realized that people in the European countries have a completely different way of taking a look at your resumes as compared to India and US. So that's why it's important for you to understand the demographics and the location specifications and the company's requirements. They believe adding a picture to your resume is so important that if you don't do that, they actually, the first thing that they look at is that, and they reject you on that basis, right? And it's so surprising that on the flip side, if you're adding a picture to your resume in India or US, and if by any chance ATS is going to scan it, it's not going to read it, right? So let's discuss why ATS is important first. As I told you, it's something which will rank your resume and then increase your chances of getting, your resume shortlisted to the recruiter. So let's look at the different things that you need to take care of in an ATS friendly resume. So let's look at the format and structure. Now, even when you're using things like Canva, okay, it has a lot of fancy fonts. So what's important for you to note down there is that you have to use standard fonts. Now, when it comes to standard fonts, you should refer to fonts like Arial, Calibri, Times New Roman, or Helvetica. Okay, you should avoid any decorative or script fonts that Canva or other tools might provide you. That's again because ATS is not compatible enough to read those. Now, when it comes to layout, it should be simple. Avoid using tables, text boxes, or columns that can confuse your ATS. Okay. So, to keep it simple, you should not add any tables or text boxes or columns that's going to confuse it, because, as we discussed, it cannot read infographics and it cannot read complex stuff. Now, bullet points, it makes it more efficient, right? So it's important to add everything in bullet points because it's able to read it easily. Now, the file type. So sometimes ATS is not, ATS has a trouble reading PDF files. Sometimes, like, I understand most of us do send our resumes in PDF forms, but sometimes that might be an issue. So if you're creating your resume on Word, for example, try to save it as .doc or .docx or as plain text files. Now comes the most essential part, which is keywords. Now, when ATS is scanning or reading your resume, you know what it essentially does to rank your resume higher is read the keywords. So that's actually something which is important from every resume's point of view, no matter what part of the world you're from. So just take a look at this very carefully. Now I understand that it's a tedious process to create a resume, right? But if you do it in a way which is tailor-made for every organization you're applying for, trust me, your chances of getting shortlisted increase tenfold. Why is that? What we usually do out of sheer laziness is we create one resume and we send it to 10 places, right? But we don't understand that the job description, the requirements of every company are different. So it's very important that once you've created your resume, just have some patience to give in 5 to 10 minutes before actually sending out your resume to every company. What you're supposed to do here is read the job description thoroughly. Now, job description is something I discussed in detail during interview tips also, right? Because everything boils down to the job description. Even when the interviewer is asking you questions, they should be somewhere or the other linked to their requirements in the job description. And similarly, you have to take care of those elements in resume building also. Why is that so? Now, if we take a look from the ATS point of view, what it does is that it has a knowledge of the words that are mentioned in the job description. And when your resume goes to the ATS system, it will try to scan and look for the words, those specific keywords that are matching the job description. Now, according to a very popular analysis done by a person called Austin Belkak, who basically reviewed more than, I think, about 120,000 resumes to come to a conclusion, he realized that you should have 43 keywords from the job description in your resume. That was his analysis. Now, I understand that if you're freshers, it's very difficult to inculcate so many words from the job description into your resume. But your constant practice should be to inculcate as many words as you can from the job description. If it specifies that you have to have some good sales skills or negotiation skills or interpersonal skills because you will have to deal with clients, try to pick these words which are given according to their requirement in the job description and try to fit those somewhere in your resume. It could be your volunteering section, your experience section, your achievement section, because what ultimately ATS is going to do is it's going to keep reading those words, it's going to highlight it in its software. The more number of keywords match the job description according to ATS, your ranking of your resume is going to go higher. So that becomes very important. Therefore, make sure that you're giving at least 5 to 10 minutes to revise and to tailor make your resume according to every job that you're applying for, because trust me, sending one resume to all companies never works and it never will. So then another important thing is to have clear section headings. Now keep your section headings extremely simple. Don't try to complicate it. If you've volunteered, call it volunteering. If you have skills, write skills. If you have some additional information, call it additional information. Just don't try to make it complex, because again, ATS reads simpler things. Coming to text and language, avoid special characters, avoid headers and footers. So anything that makes the formatting complex, just avoid it. Keep it as simple, plain and vanilla as you can. And trust me, that will take you miles. Now again, when it comes to work experience, reverse chronological order is the best resume format for all types of jobs. Now, what is reverse chronological order? When you're writing your work experience, your skills, your education qualifications, your latest achievements, qualifications, and experience should come first. Now, if I've done a job in 2023, that will come on top, and then the rest will follow 22, 21. Similarly, if I've done 3 certifications, one of which was last year, one was 3 years back, one was 6 years back, I'll not put the 6 years back one first, even if I find that, that's a little more impressive and I want to highlight it. No, just go ahead with the timeline. Put it in a reverse chronological order, and that's the best resume format that you can go for. Keep your formatting extremely simple, concise, and consistent. That's again something which is very important. Again, another tip would be to avoid buzzwords and cliches. Now, what are these buzzwords and cliches? It's words like I'm consistent, I'm hardworking, right? The words that you see repeatedly on all kinds of resumes. Now, coming back to Austin Belkak's analysis, he also analyzed out of those 120,000 resumes that he scanned and that he, analyzed. His analysis said that 51% resumes have buzzwords and cliches. Now, I understand even if you want to say you're hardworking or you want to use words like that, you have to convey it somehow, right? So just try to find better ways of doing that. That will really help you. So that's one thing. And if you just do a simple Google search of buzzwords and cliches in resumes, it will give you a list. Try to avoid those as much as possible. Okay. Now, let's come back to keywords and sentence structuring in your resumes. There's a formula called the XYZ formula that I really like to follow. When you're writing your experience section, right? Make sure you're not just mentioning what you've done, because that's not something the recruiter is interested in. What they're actually interested in is what you did, by what amount, and what did you do to achieve that. That's why it's called XYZ. You can call it ABC, you can call it anything you like. It's just variables, right? So X stands for what you did, which is something we all mention. Y stands for by what amount, and Z stands for what did I do to achieve that amount. Now, how does that help you is, for example, I did an internship and I wrote handled an Instagram page. Now you see this sounds very vague. They don't even know if I've done it properly. Did I really lead to some results, right? So I've just mentioned the X part. Try inculcating Y and Z as well. Now I understand you can't put a number to it always, but at least restrict it to X and Z. So I could have just said, revamped an Instagram page that led to a sales results of 30% by doing so and so. So I've mentioned what is the change that I could bring by, revamping their Instagram account, by what amount was I able to do it, and what was the strategy I took up to do that amount, to reach that amount, right? So when you're writing subheadings in your work experience under your internships, make sure your sentence structuring is in a manner that it's relevant and it shows what you actually did to achieve what you've done in your previous organization. It gives more substance to it. Now, when it comes to these sentences, you use words like handled, revamped, or if I'm a trainer, I'll say facilitated, trained. Okay, again, to add substance to it, I can mention facilitated 50 plus hours of training for so and so people, right? So again, when you're using these words, or we call them action verbs, like handled, trained, facilitated, revamped, these are all action verbs, right? And they're a very integral part of your sentence structuring, because you never use first person while writing your resumes. You never write, I revamped an Instagram page, right? It always has to be third person. So while you're doing that, try to use as many as different words as possible. Now, how can you do that? Again, when you go back and look at your LMS, there's a file that I've sent across which has a list of these verbs and keywords, which will help you identify and give you options of a variety of words that you can use while writing those sentences in your resume. It will have different sections that you can refer to. That file is very vast. It has a lot of sections given in, which has academics, finance, different sections mentioned there, and then the verbs that are usually used and can be used under those sections. So that is something you should definitely look forward to. It will be really handy. It also has some resume templates, which are Word doc based. Now, if you wish to go ahead with Canva, you can do so. I've showed you some templates that you can go ahead with, but again, you'll have to make tweaks to it by making sure there are simpler fonts and the templates are simpler. But if you wish to go the simpler way, you wish to go the plain way that I usually prefer going, again, it all depends on your preferences and your requirements. There are a few resume templates which are editable in that document itself that I've sent you. And if I'm being very honest, as I said, that this is the best way to use this template, right? Which is the plain version one, which I mentioned. Let me just show you one more thing, which is something again I've uploaded for you on LMS, which is the templates that IIMs and IITs follow. Okay. So again, it's going to be very plain and vanilla, but it's going to look so structured that you're going to understand why it's so important to do that. Just give me 1 second and I'll share the screen with you. Okay. Mm, okay. I'm hoping you all can see this, right? So again, this is something I've shared with you in a Word doc version so that you can directly make edits to it and it makes your life simple and easy and convenient. This is one of the templates of one of an IIM graduates, because these are the kind of templates that are actually taught there that they can use. If you see it's so black and white, you might think in comparison to Canva, this is so boring, right? But boring is what's the need of the hour, sadly. It's something that works. It's something that avoids you taking risk of your resumes not getting shortlisted. So make sure you're writing your name here, your email ID. Again, I've mentioned here towards the end. If you see LinkedIn, you should add a hyperlink. Again, I'd suggest this is something you push upwards. So you can write it here. You can put your LinkedIn profile here. You can avoid adding date of birth. That's not really required. But again, work experience, if you want to mention, you can. Otherwise, focus on the top section on writing your name, your address, phone number, email ID, and hyperlinking your LinkedIn profile. Now, you see, it's so concise and it's so well written. Again, I wouldn't call it completely ATS friendly, because if you see, there is a table given here. You can completely skip, adding these tables if you want. But again, these are simpler things, so it still works for you. It has been divided into different sections in such a structured manner that when the recruiter actually reads it in one go, they can see, okay, in May, this person did this. These are the things that they've worked on. It's like the keywords are actually, it's something that I'm able to scan immediately, right? So that's something that comes in handy when you're using templates which are simpler, plain, and vanilla. So make sure you're doing that, and that can really help you. Now, how do you know if you know what you're doing and what you've created is actually ATS friendly? Go through websites like JobScan or Resume Worded. There are a lot of websites out there. You can see which ones are free, which ones work for you, which ones are authentic. These websites, once you're done creating your resume, will allow you to upload your resume and check if it's ATS friendly. Now, these are very beneficial. Why? Because when you do that, it gives you a percentage and it also gives you recommendations. For example, it says 56%, which means it's 56% ATS friendly. And then it will give you recommendations. It might say something like lack of keywords, or it might say something like the font should be changed. It will give you great recommendations that once you work upon it, if your score is anywhere about 75-80%, you're good to go. It is good enough for you to actually send out your resume. But again, as I mentioned, just make sure you're tailor making it and make sure that you're working on it in a personalized manner while you're applying for different jobs and sending it to different people out there. Now, to the last part, let's discuss some do's and don'ts. Since we've already discussed a lot of this is going to be a fairly simple thing to deal with. Again, I've talked about it should be reverse chronological order. You should be very specific. It should be crisp and to the point. Professional picture, preferably not. Now, again, I'm only saying this in context of US, India, and the firms that are actually using ATS. Again, that's something you might ask me, that how do we know if they're using it or not? There are two things here. One is that to be on the safer side, this resume works. Even if they're not using the system, if it's neat, tidy, it will work for you. So you can go ahead with it. But again, it depends on the demographic areas, right? So if you're sending it out in US and in India, this will work for you no matter the company is using ATS or not. So when it comes to different countries, when it comes to different organizations, you have to do your research. You can go you can go on Google, you can go on websites like Glassdoor, you can try connecting to people. Now this is a little difficult part, but if you're lucky enough to have connections in that organization, or you know somebody who's worked there, maybe tell them to share their resume that worked for them to get into that organization, and then you can get a fair idea of what works and what doesn't. But if you can't do that, just do as much research as you can according to that job, according to that role, the organization, the country, and then try to give in your best shot by being on the safer side and creating an ATS friendly resume, especially in India and US. Then comes the sentence structure. I've already discussed the XYZ formula, right? So X stands for what did you do, Y by what amount, and Z, what did you do to achieve that amount? So instead of saying handled an Instagram page, I would say revamped a business page on Instagram that led to 5% increase in revenue. Focus on the structure. It should be very well structured, to the point, concise, crisp. Use the right action verbs, which is something I told you. I've shared a Harvard document with you on your LMS, which will have a list and a plenty of verbs that you can choose from. Emphasize on results, not tasks, which brings us to XY said, that they really want to know how did you actually lead to the results instead of just being focused on task. When it comes to don'ts, you cannot absolutely have any kinds of spelling errors or grammatical issues. That's when AI tools like ChatGPT come in and help you. But again, you should definitely revise them, even if you're relying on them. You can also have an extension of Grammarly on your laptops so that it can give you recommendations. Now, again, one tip with Grammarly is you should not completely blindly follow it. It will give you a lot of recommendations, but try to filter out whatever works for you and what does not. It shouldn't be too colorful. We've discussed design should not overpower your content. in the first instant, don't go for any short forms or abbreviations. Expand every term that you're writing in your resume. Avoid buzzwords or cliches. We've discussed Bellcax analysis that 51% resumes have buzzwords and cliches. It shouldn't be too long. It shouldn't be too short, right? If you're a fresher, make sure your resume does not exceed 1 page. If you have a few years of experience, it can spill over to 2 pages, but the ideal resume size is 1 page. Tone shouldn't be in first and third person. As we've discussed, we start from the action verbs itself, and never misrepresent your data is something which we have again discussed, that if you lie on your resume, it is going to lead to a spiral of lies, leaving a bad impression, and that's definitely not going to land you a job. So that's what I had for today's session. Let me just look at the Q&A section, because I think I can see a lot of messages. Let me just see if it's relevant and I can answer that. And in case you have any more questions, just feel free to type it out and I can discuss it. Okay, I can just see a lot of enrollment numbers and project related questions, but I'm still trying to see if I've missed something. Okay, somebody has asked, if we put all the related keywords in the resume and we color them in white, I mean, you shouldn't really color it. It has to be black and white. When the background is white, your words have to be black, right? There's no need to highlight, because what happens is when you're writing bullet points, again, we discussed, right, that it's important that you write everything in bullet points so that it's crisp and concise. So when you're writing in bullet points, it's easy for the recruiter to identify and see all the keywords that you've mentioned, and for ATS also to recognize. So you don't really have to color or highlight it. That's not really important. Then somebody has asked, what is the keywords from job description? So if you just have a look at any job description, or if you don't have one, you can Google it. It says roles and responsibilities, qualifications required, experience required, and then there are a lot of bullet points given. So they will specify the company's needs for that specific job role. What are they looking for in the candidate? And those are the keywords that you can pick from. It will mention a lot of skills, a lot of things that they expect from you, right? So you can pick keywords from there and then you can add it to your resume. You can use a cover letter with your resume. Now, again, that's something that's very subjective. Some companies do ask for a cover letter. If they do, you can add one. If they don't, you can let it go as well. Now, your cover letter, you can either put it on a Word doc and attach it, or you can just write a mail, like write it as the mail body, and that also works as a cover letter sometimes. Okay. Okay, there's a question. Okay, somebody said, can you show an example of a good resume so that we'll have an idea? Now, this question was posted at 3:30, so I hope you got clarity on this post that, because I did show you some templates and as I've mentioned, I have put in some editable templates for you on your LMS, which will give you easy access, so you don't have to worry about that. Then what will be the points we should focus on to put in your resume as a fresher, as we can't put work experience? Now, see, I personally believe that every college these days makes one internship at least compulsory in the first 3 years of your graduation, right? So even if they don't, like, this is your chance to actually do some internships, right? So when you're doing an internship, that comes under work experience. But if you haven't, and you've lost the chance to have done anything like that, focus on your achievements that you've done in your college, focus on extracurriculars, your achievements, your volunteering experiences, um, any kind of projects you've worked on, mention any kind of research papers or articles that you've written and that might you've been trying to get them published. So focus on all the things which are a blend of your academic and non-academic achievements, in a manner to showcase that you do possess the skills that they are looking for. And if not, you're still the right fit, because those skills have made you this person that if they give you an opportunity, you are keen to learn and you will be able to land the job better. So focus on your skills by giving some substantial examples of some relevant work experience, if not internships, if not the projects, volunteering, or any kind of extracurriculars that you worked on. Okay. Uh, So there's a question: in case I'm a chef and want to apply for an accounts post where I do not have experience, but I have the academic qualifications, how do I frame up my resume? Now, very honestly, this is a tricky part, right? Because when you're saying that you don't have work experience, even though you have the qualifications, you need to give some substantial data to prove that you've actually worked towards it, right? So in that case, what happens is that when you're aiming for a job position which is dependent on a career switch, like I also told you last time that I also did make a career switch. The best part is that once you've thought that you want to make a career switch, spend at least the next 6 months trying to get some substantial evidence and substantial experience in that field. Now, I'm not saying that you have to necessarily work for an accounts post to get a job there, because again, it boils down to who will give you the job if you don't have experience, right? So try to do some courses where you've upskilled yourself in that. You could do some online courses, you could do some volunteering work, you could do some internships. That's the best way to start. Whenever you're switching your career, doing some online courses or trainings or certifications, and starting with internships. I'm sorry, just give me 1 second. Okay. So as I was saying, that when you have to make a career switch, try to do some online courses that will substantiate. Try to do some online certifications that you think might come in handy for that job role. Or the best way is to try and find internships in that role, because once you have internships, that does count as experience, and then it'll be easy for you to transition from one field to another. Okay. What else do we have? Okay, so if there's a time gap that you have to mention, now again, this is something that you have to deal in a very tricky manner. And somehow, once you reach the interview, we discussed last time what are the kind of answers that you can go ahead with and tackle with when it comes to gap in your resume. But my only suggestion is, if you have had gaps, if you're planning to take gaps, just do something during that gap that could come in and count in as a relevant experience. Do some online course, or do some kind of volunteering which actually justifies the gap that you've taken. Now, even if you couldn't, maybe due to some medical reasons or any other reasons at all, now when you're applying for the job, when for example, you took a 6 months gap and now you're ready to keep your foot back in, and you couldn't do anything prior to that, my suggestion would be, take up some courses which probably finish in 1 week or finish in 2 weeks, 30 hours, 40 hours courses which might be relevant to your job or to your industry. Because even if you've done it towards the end, you can still justify that you have upskilled yourself during this period. You have kept yourself up to the mark by knowing the industry trends, by reading. So once you have some substantial things like courses or certifications, it's best to add that in your resume. And once you've added a bit of it, at least once you're shortlisted for the interview, they will ask you this question, right? What usually happens is that after they've shortlisted you, that's when this question comes, especially in the interview. So that's how you tackle it. Once you're done through, once your resume has been shortlisted, once you're up for the interview, that's when it's more important to deal with this question rather than worrying about it in your resume. Try to put in as many skills and certifications as you can to justify what you've done, to show that you're actually capable enough to handle this job, and rest you can just handle it well in the interview like we discussed last time. So that can come in really handy. Okay. Can we use Chat GPT to scan various job description and guess the most suitable keywords to include in the resume? See, you can use Chat GPT for a lot of things, right? But the important part here is that I don't think the job descriptions are so long. So if you just go through it, it'll take barely 5 minutes for you to read, identify the right keywords, and then go ahead with it and add it to your resume. You can use and you can leverage AI tools like ChatGPT, like we discussed, in the best way possible, but you'll have to keep making tweaks to it in order to give it a personalized and a human touch. I think I have addressed all the questions related to resume building. If there's anything else, we can take it up in the next session. But that's all I have for today. And thank you so much for attending the session.
Thank you so much, Hanspreet. It was a wonderful session and indeed very informative, and something which many of us did not know about. And I'm pretty sure about it that many students were not very much aware about all the things that you have told today. These are very technical in case of resume building. And because I can understand if these things are new for me, they are new for many of my students as well.